What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Saturdays in the SEC, episode 124. We're back for part 7 of 8 of our 2024 SEC preview series. Got Auburn to talk about tonight, one of the newcomers to the SEC in Texas. So, got really two interesting teams to discuss tonight going into the 2024 season. Couple teams, are a team obviously on the rise, or you could really say two teams on the rise. With Auburn, the way they've been recruiting, going into year two with Hugh Freeze. You've got Steve Sarkisian at Texas, the way they've been recruiting going into year four, fresh off a playoff appearance. So, teams with high expectations going into 2024, a team that's going to be able to compete at the top of the SEC and maybe win the SEC title. You got an Auburn team that's looking to get there as well, and kind of climb that ladder going into year two. But kind of going to kick it off with Auburn. But just give me your thoughts, on your expectations going in this season. Record wise, like what's your thoughts of the roster as a whole? Obviously, a lot of impact freshmen that they're going to be counting on to contribute right away. So just give me your thoughts on the Auburn roster and the expectations going into year two.
I think the roster is completely 180 from last year. Definitely a lot of young guys, but a lot more talent and a lot more depth. Jared Smith, guy out of Thompson, defensive edge rusher out of Thompson, committed to Auburn yesterday or 2 days ago. A 4-star out of the 2025 class. So Hugh Freeze is just continuing to bring that class along. Finishing probably going to be in the top 5, top 7 class. So that's huge. Still fourth in the SEC behind Georgia, LSU, and Alabama, which is insane. Just shows you how dominant the league is. But I'm very pleased as an Auburn fan of where the roster is for sure and where the future is heading. But this season, there's a lot to look forward to for sure. But then there's a lot of question marks. Really, the big one that everybody's asking and that the media is kind of honed in on is Peyton Thorne the guy? Is he going to be better than last year, or how much better can Peyton Thorne be than last year? I mean, this is his super senior year, or he's a redshirt senior, so he's had plenty of games under his belt. This will be his 4th year starting, so there's no more excuses. And I'm expecting him to improve, because if you go back and look last year, now granted, for sure there were some bad throws in there, no doubt about it. There's times he held onto the ball too long, that he made plenty of mistakes. There's no questioning that. He was splitting time early on in the year. So that kind of was hard to get his feet under him. But then you go back and you watch a lot of the games. There were so many drop passes throughout the season. The weapons on the outside were just not there for Peyton Thorne. Weren't able to get separation from the defensive backs to create easier throws for Peyton Thorne. I think this year with the weapons that they have, I mean, they've gone out, they got Keandre Lambert-Smith, they got Robert Lewis, they got Cam Coleman coming in. Perry Thompson is flashing in fall practice, and through talks with Hugh Freeze, it sounded like he's going to be able to play a little faster than they expected him to. He's going to get on the field a little quicker. Could potentially be starting. Could potentially be competing for a starting role by the end of the season. You also went out and got Sam Jackson, who gave Auburn fits last year as Cal's quarterback. He's transferred over, and he's going to play receiver for Auburn. So that's big as well. And then you got Rivaldo Fairweather at the tight end position, along with 6-year tight end Luke Deal. So I think the weapons are definitely there, because then you got your running backs. You got Jarquez Hunter. You got Jeremiah Cobb. You got Damari Alston. The weapons are there for the offense to have a much, much better year than last year. But then the schedule, is very tough. But then you look at the offensive line, it has a chance to have 4 seniors starting, and then the other guy, center Connor Lewis, freshman All-American last year, SEC All-SEC freshman last year, is going to be anchoring that line at the center position at Connor Lewis, a sophomore. And then Isaiah Miller started every game last year as tackle spot, is expected to play right tackle again. And then Percy Lewis is going to play left tackle. He came from Mississippi State, started some games there, was in and out of the rotation. Senior as well, coming over from Mississippi State, he's going to play left tackle. Dylan Wade played some tackle, some guard last year. He's going to expected to play left guard. He is a true offensive guard. He's expected to play the left guard position. And then Jeremiah Wright, who's played both offensive and defensive line, he's expected to play the right guard position. So the offensive line is going to have a lot of veterans and a lot of snaps throughout the whole entire line. So that's very, very enticing as an Auburn fan as you're looking at the at the offensive side of the football. And then on the defensive side of the football, I think DJ Durkin is going to do great things. Everywhere he's been successful. I mean, he was at Ole Miss, turned that around from what it was when he got there. He's been at Michigan. He's been several different places. And so he was at Texas A&M most recently in 2022 and 2023. A lot of senior leadership coming back in the defensive backfield. You got Jalen McLeod, expected to have a really big breakout season from what everybody that's covering Auburn is saying. They said they expect him to be up there in the sack leaders in the conference. Return him at the buck position. You got Austin Keys. Eugene Asante was the team tackler last year, a team tackle leader last year. Keldrick Falk is the guy's name that I could not remember the other night. I was talking about his brother, Caleb Falk, that committed. Keldrick Falk played pretty much every game last year, started just about every game last year at the defensive end position as a true freshman. He was an freshman all-SEC team last year, a team member last year, so he's expected to take big strides this year. And then you got transfers in from Texas with Trill Carter and Jaron Thompson. Trill Carter's a nose tackle. Jaron Thompson's a safety. They both come in with a lot of experience, expected to play right away. And then you also have Jason Jones, who plays the tackle position, defensive tackle position. He's what people are saying is the biggest, most vocal leader for the defensive line down at Auburn. You got Champ Anthony returning, who played in every game last year. Didn't get many starts, but played in every single game last year at the star position. And then you got young cornerbacks, Kayan Lee and Caleb Wooden, expected to step up. Caleb Wooden's played a fair amount. He's technically a veteran now, but I don't think he started too many games down there for the Tigers. So expect them to take a step up and try to fill those gaps that they lost last year with Jalen Simpson, Nehemiah Pritchett going to the draft. And then Keontae Scott returns. He's the big focal point in the defensive backfield. Played a lot of games last year, played a lot of snaps, didn't go to the draft, decided to come back. So the pieces are there. It is new coaching, which was needed from last season. But there's got to be more consistency to me. Last year, there was too much inconsistency both ways. There was consistency at times where Auburn looked like a fantastic football team, and then there was consistency at times where they looked really, really bad. I mean, they gave up 40-something to LSU. They didn't even look competitive on the offensive or defensive side of the football that game. Then you look at the New Mexico State game. Then you flip around and you look at the Georgia game. You look at the Alabama game. It's like there's consistencies where they were consistently good. They had three games in a row, conference games, that they won by double digits or more. Now, granted, they were Vanderbilt, Arkansas, and Mississippi State, so it's not like they were beating some world-beating teams here, but they had three conference games where they won by double digits, 3 in a row. Then you turn around and you lose to New Mexico State. Then you play Alabama really tough. Then you turn around and you lose in the bowl game by a large margin. The consistency's got to come. He definitely overhauled the wide receiver room. I think that's the big part of what's going to make this Auburn offense take that step up. Because not only, yes, he went out and got guys. Malcolm Simmons was part of that recruiting class as well. Went out and got some guys at the high school ranks to come in and compete at the wide receiver position. But he also went through the portal and got those big guys that are expected to come in and make an impact right away, that's played a lot of college football. So I'm really excited about that. But the one I'm most excited about is probably Robert Lewis. I mean, caught over 1,000 yards passing last year for Georgia State. He was their top receiver. Definitely has the speed you want to see out of that slot position. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do. But I know all this is coming through a orange and blue colored lens a little bit. I try to be unbiased as I can, but I do want to get your opinion as an outside fan, just looking in and being as unbiased as you can.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, offensively, you mentioned overhauling the wide receiver room. I mean, that's the first thing that stood out. Bringing in those 4 freshmen. You mentioned Cam Coleman, kind of a day one starter. We know what we're going to get out of him. I feel like, as far as the ability to get on the field, early on. He's already flashed in spring and in fall camp. So he's a guy like kind of a plug and play day one starter. I've been really impressed just seeing some footage of fall camp, and I was really impressed with Perry Thompson, like just how he looks physically. Like he looks like a SEC wide receiver, like day one. I don't know how he is, execution wise yet, as far as getting the fundamentals down that he needs to in this offense, and I don't know how far along he is in that, but physically, he looks really, really impressive for a true freshman that hadn't played the down yet. So, yeah, like you said, some good things out of him. Hearing good things out of him early from fall camp, and you mentioned Malcolm Simmons. Heard some good things about him making plays. Bryce Kane. You mentioned. I thought Sam Jackson really interesting. I saw that name and I remember them picking him up, and I was like, I think he kind of tore them up in that Cal game. Like he was a really impressive athlete. Kind of can do multiple things. So you mentioned Robert Lewis, Keandre Lambert Smith from Penn State. So yeah, just completely overhauled the wide receiver core. A lot of the talk this offseason, I think the expectation early on was, Auburn was going to go get a transfer portal quarterback, and kind of hearing the talk with some of the insiders, it's like, well, they didn't really pursue that avenue because the roster, although it's better, they feel like they're more than just a quarterback away. Like they don't feel like the roster is not exactly where it needs to be yet and where it's going to be. So I think it makes sense to why they held off a little bit. It's kind of like free agency in the NFL. If you want to go make that splash, but you don't feel like you got the foundation totally built yet. So it's like it feels like a little early. And I think that's how Auburn feels about their roster. It's like, yeah, we're building, like we're getting there, but we're not quite there yet to go make that big splash and get that quarterback. Go get a Cam Ward or somebody like that. So that they maybe could have gotten. I think they're kind of keeping their chips right now, and I think they're gonna go all in when the time's right. But I think the roster wise, they know they're not quite there yet as far as going and getting their quarterback, maybe splurging a little bit. So, that made sense to me because I mean, their roster wise, it's not quite there, but they're certainly headed in the right direction. A lot better than a year ago. You mentioned the offensive line returning most of the starters. I think Peyton Thorne, I think he can be more than serviceable when he's got the right pieces around him. And I did want to ask you too, some coaching staff changes. Derek Nix coming in from Ole Miss to be the offensive coordinator, and there's talks. Obviously, Hugh Freeze is going to have a much bigger impact. At the day to day offensively, the game planning stuff like that. How much bigger do you think his influence, and because the offense didn't really flow like a Hugh Freeze offense would want to operate. So how much bigger do you think his impact and role, like in the day to day and the game planning, will be this year?
It'll be noticeable offensively from snap one for sure. There's Derek Nix and Hugh Freeze have coached together. They coached together for 5 seasons at Ole Miss before Hugh Freeze was done there. The camaraderie is definitely there. And then there was a clip that came out. I heard it on Jock's Radio. I can't remember who was interviewing Hugh Freeze or who he was speaking to. It might have just been a media presser after practice. I can't remember exactly what it was. But he was talking about Derek Nix, and he said Derek Nix was having a meeting with the quarterback coach, Kent Austin. It was him. It was Derek Nix, Kent Austin, and some players. He didn't specify who the players were. He just said they were having a meeting. And he said, I just walked into the meeting. I was not part of the meeting. I just walked in there, and in the middle of it, I heard Derek Nix, what he was saying. And he said, it is so refreshing to be able to sit there and listen to your assistant coaches say exactly what you were going to say if you were the one leading this meeting, or if you're the one talking right now. That's exactly what he took the words right out of my mouth. He understands my philosophy, my mindset, my concepts. So the camaraderie, which I don't know if people outside the Auburn family probably did not see this last year, but there was a lot of disagreement and headbutting going on between the coaching staff last year behind the scenes. So that's with a first year team, you ain't got many players, and that's going on as well. It's a lot harder to run a program. He's talking about Hugh Freeze talked about openly that the coaching staff, the camaraderie, the relationships, that they get each other better. They're better around each other. They enjoy being around each other. They understand they're all on the same wavelength. Basically, is what he's saying. And he's saying the guys that are left over from last year, that didn't get shipped out on the first train out of Auburn. The guys that remained on the staff, he said they've bought in. They say, okay, well, I might not like it this way, but I see the results it gets, so I do like that. So I'm bought in now. He said it was taking a little bit, but he said everybody on the coaching staff on the side of that is all bought in. They're all on the same wavelength. So
Yeah.
I think that's going to pay huge dividends on both sides of the ball, obviously. But defensively, Auburn was not terrible last year. They had spurts and moments where they were terrible, but it all falls back on the offense. I mean, when the defense is out there for what seems like 80 snaps a game, it's tough to stay, that way to your top level of play for the whole game. So I expect the offense to see a big impact of that early on from snap number one against A&M, Alabama
Yeah, I
A&M.
mean, I think like you said too, and that's the thing I think people have to take into account too. It's like year one, new staff, some guys that had never coached with them before. I think going into year two, your culture's established, your philosophies, like you said, schematically, you get, like you say, okay, what didn't work in year one? Now you know the changes you need to make going into year two, with your staff, or if you
Yeah,
need to
and what
adjust.
did work and lean into it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think just this goes for any staff, but I think a lot more comfort going into year two, and I think the guys he's got in place now uh, fits more like what he wants to do. Like you said, the camaraderie, the communication, they're all on the same page going into this year. So I feel like staff wise, roster wise, they're definitely heading in the right direction. Um, going into this season. So, kind of want to talk about defensively a little bit. If staff changes on the defensive side, you mentioned DJ Durkin coming in from Texas A&M's been around as a head coach, as a defense coordinator at multiple stops. I think one of the better defensive minds, defense coordinators in the country. I think he's going to do a really good job. And like you said, the defense a lot of times was fine last year. I
Mhm.
think it was just one of those situations where at the end of the day it's a team game, and each unit has to feed off each other, and if one's sputtering, it's going to hurt the other one as well. I mean,
Yep.
it's complementary football. It's what we've talked about so many times, and I think you'll see a lot more of that this year. But bringing in Charles Kelly as well, co DC and safeties coach, big name on the recruiting trail as
Big
well.
time.
I think, you're seeing, you know, a lot of his impact too here with this next recruiting cycle that we've been talking about. So, but kind of looking at the defensive roster though, the main thing that steps out is the overhauled defensive line. That was a big thing in the winter portal window, same as the spring. Bringing in, Philip Bladee from Indiana, Trill Carter, Texas, Gage Keys, Kansas, Keyron Crawford, Arkansas State, Isaiah Rakes. Those are kind of the big five they brought in on that defensive front. Completely overhauled that unit, really. I mean, I feel like a lot more quality bodies there, quality depth that they're going to be able to rotate a little bit more as well. So, but there's playmakers, I feel like, at all three levels of this defense. You mentioned Eugene Asante, kind of all over the field last year. I mean, he's a guy that you would always pop on your screen. He was always around the football, it seemed like. So, Jalen McLeod there at linebacker as well, Austin Key. So I feel like you mentioned Kay and Lee. So they've got playmakers at all three levels. Feel like their depth's in a better spot. Coaching staff as a whole. So yeah, I mean, I like where the roster's headed, both sides of the ball. I mean, obviously it's not quite there yet to compete at the top of the SEC, but you see those strides being made through the portal, especially through high school recruiting. So, yeah, I expect a even better product this year, in all aspects, and they're going to be very interesting to watch. Um, Kind of want to get into their schedule now. Get your opinion on what the ceiling you think is, what the floor is, and I look at these first 4 weeks, and um, those first four are very, very favorable. I think Auburn's got a good chance to get off to a hot start.
I think Auburn wins 8 games. I've said that for a while. I think I think they're going to improve on last year's season. I think they at least have 7 wins, but I think I see 8 in this schedule. I mean, you got to think first 5 weeks are at home, huge. October is a brutal stretch. They don't have a single home game in the month of October.
Mm.
So that's tough. They have a bye week in there, but they don't have a single home game in the month of October. Uh, but if you go and look, you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of their teams they play this year, last year, had a win total of 7 or less. One of them had a win total of 7. The rest were 6 or less. So the schedule is not terrible. Now the ones that they get that are really good are all won double digits. There, you had Oklahoma, Georgia, Missouri, and Alabama all won double digit games. But other than that, the most wins from last year as a team that Auburn is facing was 7 wins, and that was Kentucky and Texas A&M. Both went 7 and 6. So it's a very manageable schedule. I think if Auburn can get off to a hot start, if they can squeak out and win that game against Oklahoma to push it to 5-0 going into Sanford Stadium at Georgia, I think that sets them up to have 8 wins, potentially 9. I really don't see them getting that Oklahoma game. I think Oklahoma's just a better team. I really do. I hope I'm wrong, but I just think Oklahoma's a better team. I think they get Kentucky. I think they get Vanderbilt, ULM, and I believe that Auburn's going to beat Texas A&M this year. Texas A&M's had hype since Jimbo Fisher's first year, and they have followed it up 0 times. I just am not buying into the hype. I know it's a new coach, but that makes me even buy into it even less. I'm not buying into what Texas A&M is going to be this year. I've gone back on them since when we went over them. I think they're probably going to be an 8-win football team. I think I said their ceiling was 9 when we covered them, but I think they're going to be an 8-win football team, potentially a 7-win. And I think Auburn beats them to get to 8 wins. And I think they finish their season 8-4.
Yeah, I mean, kind of looking at this schedule. I mean, like I said, I think it lays out perfectly to get off to a hot start. I mean, I think 4-0. I mean, in my opinion, I see 6 for sure wins. I mean, I think 6 is absolutely bare. 6 is the floor for me. I mean, Alabama and A&M win. They should beat Cal at home. Absolutely. It was a competitive game last year, but I can't see
No.
Cal winning that game at all. New Mexico win. This is not New Mexico State. This is New Mexico win. Arkansas at home. First SEC game. That's a win to me. Auburn's better than them. And I'm gonna be honest. I really feel I would pick Auburn to beat Oklahoma tonight if I have to make a pick right now. I just feel that those first 4 games, they're going to be 4-0. I know that Auburn family, the hype train is going to be rolling down the tracks. OU's coming in. Second SEC game late September. Auburn's undefeated. I know the vibes are going to be absolutely sky high at this point. Recruiting's going well. The team's 4-0. It's gonna be a hype environment, even though it's 2:30 in the afternoon. It's gonna be jumping for OU. I think that's a real tough. I believe if I'm not mistaken, that's OU's first SEC road game.
Correct.
I'm pretty positive. So I don't know. I think that's gonna be a real tough game for OU. I agree with what you said. I do think OU's a better team, but I don't think it's so insurmountable that I think Auburn will play up in this game a little bit. First big road game for Jackson Arnold. I mean, to me, this is one of the matchups this year I'm really looking forward to. Like, to me, that's a game where, yeah, Oklahoma's a little bit better team. They're better roster-wise for sure, but it's on the road in Jordan-Hare. Like, that kind of, it brings them down a little bit. We're now a little bit more even. So
I like what you're preaching, man. I'm loving it.
Honestly, I would not be surprised at all if they start out 5-0. I think 4-0 is a near certainty. But I would not be shocked at 5-0. Obviously, like you said, the tough stretch there in October, at Georgia, at Missouri, at Kentucky. In my opinion, they just need to get one of those, like between Missouri or Kentucky, win one of those. You got Vandy at home. You got bye week ULM at home. Then A&M, like you said, to me is another coin flip game. Like A&M, yeah, they're better roster wise, but like I said, that home environment is tough to win on the road, and you don't exactly know what both of the teams are going to be at this point in the year, like where they're at in the standings. And to me, these games right before rivalry week this year are so interesting. I mean, you got Auburn hosting A&M, Alabama's going to Oklahoma. Like you don't have your normal ULM before rivalry week, before the Iron Bowl or whatnot, So you've got like a legit conference opponent. Like you're going to really have to scratch and claw to get those wins. And so to me, it's like, who's able to stay focused and stay grounded and not look ahead. Um, so, and A&M too, they have Texas the following week. They're renewing that rivalry. So it's like, both teams are going to have huge matchups the following week. So it's like, who's able to really lock in and focus. And, that's a tough road trip for A&M, before hosting Texas. So, you never know. To me, it's those to me are two of the more pivotal games. I would throw that Kentucky one in there as well as kind of a turning point type of game. But those three are coin flips. If they can get two of them, I think you'd have to feel really, happy as an Auburn fan. I don't think eight. I got them at 7 to 8 wins, but I can see 8 or 9 on there. Like I can talk myself into that, honestly. Just the way the schedule lines up and things of that nature. But yeah, I got them in that 7 to 8 win range. I don't think 8-4 is offline at all, and I think the ceiling's 9. Honestly, I mean, if things really click well, and with the games that they have at home. So, but I do believe they're going to get off to a hot start and really have that momentum going early on. I think that could bode well for them in that Oklahoma game. So early in the season.
I think you're right on it. I mean, I think floor is six wins, absolute floor.
Yeah, I see 6 absolutely. I mean, to me, 6 is bare minimum because the 6 teams we named, they're clearly better than those teams. I mean, so
absolutely.
Yeah, I think 6 is my absolute floor. That's if things go kind of wrong, like if you don't really get that improvement you see. But yeah, I absolutely, and I do think out of Oklahoma at home, A&M at home, Kentucky on the road, even Missouri on the road. Like I think they get 1 or 2 of those at least. I think
absolutely.
So I think 7 to 8. I feel like it's a good sweet spot because I feel like some of the other ones, tough road games, Georgia, Alabama, Missouri, those are going to be pretty hard to grab more than likely. But everything else, I think's definitely on the table.
Yeah, and all the Auburn fans that are out there that are bashing Peyton Thorne and saying there's no chance Auburn can win. I'm saying that Auburn can win these games, eight games with Peyton Thorne, because I've seen Auburn with less wide receiver talent, about the same offensive and running back talent, win 8 games with the likes of Barrett Trotter and Clint Mosley and Kyle Frazier leading the backfield. I promise you Peyton Thorne is better than all 3 of those guys. We have seen teams be led by Jeremy Johnson, Sean White. I'll say Kyle Frazier again. I mean,
not
Lord
the
have mercy.
skateboarder Sean White either.
Yeah, not the skateboarder Sean White either. No.
Or is he snowboarder or skateboarder? I'm sorry.
Snowboarder.
Excuse me. Yes, thank you. Yeah, snowboarder. Sean.
But you got Barrett Trotter and Clint Mosley were competing down to week 1 of who was going to be the starting quarterback, and it was like a damn good race. And now we're going up raising hell about Peyton Thorne. Get the, out of my face. That drives me nuts. We have seen so much worse quarterback play, and they're going to talk about that when clearly you can look around and see the surrounding cast. Bryce Young would look bad in. I'm just telling you. Give him a chance. I'm not saying he's going to be the leading passer in the SEC. I'm not saying he's better than Carson Beck or he's better than Quinn Ewers or he's better than Jalen Milroe. By no means. But by God, he is not as bad as a lot of Auburn fans are making him out to be. He's going to turn some heads this year. He's going to make Auburn a much more competitive team on the offensive side of the ball because of the people that Hugh Freeze has put around him.
Yeah, you, and that's the thing. Like we've seen him have success before, so I mean, it's not like it's not there. I mean, yeah, he's not going to be a superstar, necessarily, but he just needs to take care of the football, make the right reads, make the right plays. Just get the ball to his playmakers, and I'm impressed too. Like he's more mobile than people give him credit for. You saw that multiple times last year. Him able to make plays with his legs. So, I'm curious to see how they lean on that aspect maybe some too. So, yeah, I think he can be very serviceable. I mean, like you said, if he's a guy though, he needs the guys around him playing well as well. Like if the guys around him are not playing well, then it's going to be really tough on him, and it'd be tough on anybody. But yeah, I think the guys around him are going to play better. Um, I do think some of the freshman receivers are obviously going to contribute heavily, but I do think they've got some quality transfers to kind of ease some of those guys in where you don't have to just totally throw them to the wolves early on.
Yeah.
I think they've got enough guys to where you can ease them in a little bit. You don't have to solely rely on them to make everything happen for you. And they got a really good backfield too. So if their offensive line's able to progress some too, they got a really good backfield to lean on. And that's when we seen Peyton Thorne at his best. We said that when 2021 at Michigan State, when he had a really good running game, a good offensive line, he was able to make some things happen and was pretty effective. When he hasn't had that, he's struggled. That's kind of to be expected. But yeah, I think really interesting team. But I think the schedule lays out nicely for them to, take a step forward this year for sure.
Absolutely. Kind of want to turn our attention over to Texas. That's our other team we're covering this week. And I mean, I think they're going to be a lot similar to last year. They did lose some guys to the draft, but they replaced those guys through the portal at the wide receiver position, and they've been recruiting at the wide receiver position extremely well. They went out and got Isaiah Bond from Alabama. They also got what the tie end's name from
I'm wearing the
Alabama?
black. Yep.
Amari Black. They got
Mm-hmm.
him from Alabama. They've got Jonte Cook, who's a former four-star recruit. They got DeAndre Moore, another former four-star recruit. They returned Gunnar Helm at the tight end position. So I think all in all, the offensive side of the ball is going to be fine with the best offensive mind in college football there. But they have got to be better on in the red zone. Last year, they ranked 120th best offense in all of college football when they reached the 20-yard line. That is awful. They were horrible. They went for, I don't remember the exact number, X amount of fourth down conversions last year or fourth down attempts, and they converted or they failed on 12 of them. They failed on 12 fourth down attempts. They were 120th in the nation in red zone offense, which is atrocious. And Lindy's points out, which I had forgotten about this, but Lindy's points out they had two chances to win the game against Washington. They had a failed fourth down attempt, and then they got the ball back within the final 15 seconds. Had four plays to go to the end zone, and I think it was 15 yards, and they couldn't do it. And
Yep.
so at one point they had two chances to do that. At one point they ended up kicking a field goal, and the other one they didn't convert in the last 15, 20 seconds. So the red zone offense has got to be better. We know that they can blow the top off the defense. We know the explosive plays are there. We know that's what Sarkisian loves. He said he wants to be able to score on 1, 2, 3 play drives, to get it quick and put some points up. But he said it's hard. There's not many 10-plus play drives you can have throughout a game without making some mistakes, is what he said. That's why he wants to have some quick scoring plays, which I get that. But in this league, you're going to have clock control. You got to have clock management, especially in certain types of games. Teams that are able to score with you will. You're going to have and control the clock in those games. So I think on that aspect of the ball, they got to be better. And then defensive wise, there's a lot of question marks. They returned a fair amount of guys, but they lost a lot of guys up front. Went and got some guys through the portal. Got UTSA's and the AAC's Defensive Player of the Year, Trey Moore, to come in. Was the number 3 in sacks all last year, or something like that. Had 13 sacks last year was top 5 in Division One for defensive sacks or for sacks for the defensive players. And then Colin Simmons was also brought in through the portal. And they've got some guys, Justice Finkley. His dad was actually our vice principal in middle school. So shout out Dr. Finkley and Justice Finkley. Justice Finkley's played the last few years for Texas on the defensive line. He's been in the rotation, not really been a starter. He's expected to be in the rotation again this year. They got Bill Norton, came from UGA and then transferred to Arizona and then transferred to Texas. They got Alfred Collins coming back, Anthony Hill coming back, and Anthony Hill is an absolute menace on the football field. One of the best defensive players, one of the best rushers in all of college football. And then you got David Benda back, Jade Barron, Michael Taffy. So you got a load of returning guys that played a lot for you last year. The secondary was kind of their weak spot last year. Which is understandable because when you're playing Texas last year, especially, you get down early. They were phenomenal against the run. South Carolina, we talked about last week, offensively was worst in the nation or worst in the SEC with like 86 yards a game or something like that. And on the flip side, in all of college football, Texas A&M Texas was a top 5 team against the run with like 86 yards allowed on the ground game. So you understand that going against that and being down majority of the time when you're playing Texas because they score so quick and they can put up a gaudy amount of numbers, you're going to have a higher passing numbers because the offense that you're playing is going to be throwing the ball a lot more. But they were suspect in a lot of in their secondary a lot of times last year. So they need to clean that up for sure. That they've gone through the portal and do that, and they've got some younger talent that's been sitting behind some guys waiting their turn to get in that defensive backfield. But I think Texas, is going to be fine. They returned a lot of their big guys that played a lot for them last year. Their schedule is obviously much tougher than it was last year, and they had some pretty close games last year. And you look back and they lost to Oklahoma. They had a really close game with Alabama. They did end up winning, but then they ended up losing to Oklahoma. They have a close game with Houston that shouldn't have even been on the field with them. They go to overtime with Kansas State. I know Kansas State's one of the teams that it doesn't matter what their record is when they're playing a number 5 or a number 3 team in the nation. They're going to show out and they're going to put up some points and they're going to take it overtime. They're probably going to win. I mean, you look back at Oklahoma playing them a couple years ago when Jalen Hurts was their quarterback. They had beat them in the last game of the year. So Kansas State's known to do that, but they went to overtime with Kansas State. They only beat TCU by 3 points. They had a 10-point win against Iowa State. So I mean, you look back and they have a lot of close games. I don't think that's going to cut it this year in the SEC. I do think that they're ready and they're going to be able to still win a lot of ball games. But I think their first five games are going to be 5-0, and then they got Oklahoma and Dallas. That's going to be, an absolute barn burner. I feel like it always is. But that game is going to determine Texas' season. How they play against that game, what we see on the field that day is going to show us a lot about what Texas is going to be the rest of the year. So after October 12th, I think we're really going to figure out what kind of football team Texas is because before then, they really don't have that tough of a schedule. I'm not that high on Michigan this year. They lost a majority of their team. They lost a lot of coaches. They're under NCAA investigations for recruiting violations now, some level 1 infractions, some level 2 infractions. There could be a show clause thrown at them. So I don't think Michigan's going to be that great this year. So I think that they're going to be 5-0 leading into the Oklahoma game. But then after Oklahoma, it's tough. You got Georgia, Florida, which we think is going to be better than what a lot of people are saying. I don't think that's just some walkthrough, sleeper game. I think that they have a chance to give Texas a hard time, especially late in the season, depending on if Quinn Ewers can stay healthy or not, because he hasn't had a full season that he's been healthy yet. And then you end with Texas A&M. So I think definitely Texas has a more favorable schedule than Oklahoma does coming into the SEC. But I think it's a much, much, much tougher schedule than they have played the last 10 years.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's kind of the big question too. It's like how is, Texas gonna handle, I mean, not that they can't handle it, but how are they gonna handle playing this consistent of quality teams week after week after week? Like we know, there's a lot of programs they can beat SEC teams in a one game, scenario or situation, but when you go through that grind of playing, five weeks in a row, against SEC opponents, against that quality of talent and of competition. Like you said, some of those games in the past where they may have played, a mediocre game, a B minus or a C plus type of game. They've been able to win those games against some of the teams in the Big 12, but you can't really get away with that as much in the SEC. So you constantly got to be kind of at the top of your game, and even against some of the teams with not great records. I mean, just because you're playing a team this week that might be 4-4 in conference, I mean that's still a really quality team most of the time. So, you really got to be at the top of your game week in and week out in this conference, and I think they will find that out. Now, with that being said, I mean they have a great roster, a great coaching staff. One of the best rosters in college football for sure. Kind of a lot of things I said with Georgia though. A lot of continuity with the roster going into this season. Same thing with the coaching staff too. This is multiple years. These guys have been in place, and Steve Sarkisian said a lot about he thinks they have the best, OC, DC, special teams combo in the country. Even though Kyle Flood, he's the OC offensive line coach, but I mean, really, Steve Sarkisian's the offense coordinator for this team. I mean, he calls the plays. It's kind of like it's always been for him. Pete, Pete Kayakowski.
Yeah.
I butchered his name, I'm sure, but he been a really good defensive coordinator for them. You mentioned it that they're great against the run last year, one of the best in America. Jeff Banks is the special teams coordinator there. He was at Alabama in the past when Sark was there. Followed him to Texas, and they've done a really good job. So I feel like he does have one of the better staffs in the country. And he's built this thing the right way, through high school recruiting. He's done a great job building up this program, and I think he's built it to be a long lasting contender going forward because they have all the resources they need, and it seems now they have the right guy, lead them into the future. So, really interesting team though. Offensively, I knew they weren't great in the red zone last year, but I was shocked when you said they were that poorly. I did not think it was that bad. I mean, especially you don't expect that from a Steve Sarkisian offense that had a lot of talent. It wasn't like this was a bare bones offense either. I mean, they were elite. So the fact that they were that poor in the red zone was definitely surprising. You would expect that to be much better this year.
It was an exact percentage of 50.8%.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, would you say 120th in the country?
120th. That means only 11 teams were worse than them.
Yeah, that's definitely surprising.
Something like that.
You mentioned with the wide receiver core too, a lot of transfers. Isaiah Bond from Alabama, Matthew Golden from Houston, Silas Bolden from Oregon State. I believe those three were all the leading receivers for their team. You mentioned Jonte Cook too, a former, really highly rated recruit. They think he can help in the return game as well. And then Ryan Wingo, a 5-star freshman wide receiver coming in, they think can contribute pretty early on this year as well. So it's going to take a little bit of time to gel, with this offense and with Quinn Ewers, getting that chemistry going. But a lot of talent in that room, though. So I think they're going to be just fine there. 4 starters back on the offensive line, led by Kelvin Banks, who's a all Big 12 first teamer last year. Probably one of the better handful of tackles in the country. And then, a really good running back room, led by C.J. Baxter, Jaden Blues, a solid running back as well. So, good in the backfield and arguably the best quarterback room in the country too, with Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning, and some of those guys. So yeah, I mean just all around really impressive roster offensively, and they got one of the best minds in the country calling the plays and scheming things up for them. So yeah, this is definitely going to be one of the best offenses in the country. They got everything they need at their disposal. And as you said, defensively, The big question is how do they mitigate the loss of those two big defensive tackles? Byron Murphy, Keandre Sweat, two highly rated draft picks this past cycle. And then the secondary, needs to be better, against the pass. I mean, they were so good against the run last year. Obviously teams were constantly throwing on them. They addressed that through the portal some with Javion Cole from San Jose State. They got Andrew Makuba from Clemson who's played a lot of football. And then you mentioned some of the guys up front like Trey Moore, you know, from UTSA, who's a great pass rusher, double-digit sacks a year ago. So they got a lot of really good pieces. I was looking at both of their transfer and high school classes. They were sixth-rated portal class via 247. They only had 11 commits. So, I mean, that was extremely impressive. I mean, they didn't go get a bunch of, quantity. They just went and got quality guys that they can pretty much plug and play that are going to be contributors for them. And that's the thing about Texas now. Like, that's why they're built to last, is because they built this through the high school ranks. They had the sixth ranked high school class last year. They don't have to rely on the portal like they did in year one and year two, to fill out their roster. They can just go cherry pick guys that can contribute right away for them and make really big impacts in areas that they need. And they don't have to, I've been listening to a lot of Steve Sarkisian interviews this off season, and he said going into year one they couldn't even have a spring game. He said they only had 7 offensive linemen total that could go play in a game in a scrimmage. So he's like, we've really got equality across the roster where, we're not just loaded in one or two positions. We feel good across the board that we got quality depth and positions across the entire roster. So it's in, such a better place than it was when he got there early on. They're able to use the portal now, like I said, just to go get guys that are high impact guys. And that's why I think they're built to last and built to come in the SEC and compete for an SEC title and a national title in year one. I think it's a playoff team again this year, especially in the 12-team playoff. And like you said, I think they get off to a good start, early on in September. The Michigan game obviously is going to be super fun for us to see. As you mentioned, Michigan's lost a ton of pieces from last year. A lot of things going on up there, but early on in Ann Arbor, going to be obviously a great atmosphere, and that'll be a good test for Texas early on, because even though they've lost a lot of pieces, it's still a lot of really talented players there, and that's a really tough place to play too. So that'll be a good early test for Texas before they get into SEC play, and especially that Red River rivalry on October 12th, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, Steve Sarkisian hadn't beat Oklahoma yet. I think he's 0-3 against them. Lost some really close games. He lost some heartbreakers. Last year was kind of a similar situation. So, gonna be a lot of fun. They got obviously, like I said, a tough schedule. But October 12th, it'll really ramp up for them.
Yeah, and you got to tip your cap to Sarkisian. First year there, they weren't very good. They hadn't been very good for a while. Weren't to the Texas standard. And then year two, goes and plays for the conference championship. And then year three wins the conference championship and is 6 points away from playing for the national championship. So what he's done in 3 years there is, absolutely astounding. I think he's only, trending up. I think Texas is going to be the one hoisting the trophy at the end of the year. Before too long, his foundation he's got that he's built there, that he's building that program on is out of this world. I mean, the recruiting, like you said, going through the high school rankings, they can pretty much be in Texas and being where they are. They can pretty much cherry pick anybody that they want, especially with their resume looking like it is the last few years. I don't think that there's going to be any time. And, when they, in 2009, 2005, Texas won the national championship. Then they were back in 2009 and lost to Alabama. And everybody just expected, they'll be back in a year or two. But then they never got back, and they fell off the table. I don't think now where Sarkisian's got this program, I don't think it'll ever fall off the table again, especially in today's college football world with a 12-team playoff. Texas is going to be in that conversation every single year. They might lose out one year here or there, just a game or two, but they're going to be in that conversation every year, and they're going to be relevant as long as Sarkisian's there. And you got to tip your cap to him because he's turned it around mighty fast.
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, he's built it the right way. I feel like going, really turning around their high school recruiting, getting back to that level that you would expect, Texas to recruit at. They've done a great job, developing their guys as well. They've had, some high draft picks. I mean, they're going to have several more this year, with Quinn Ewers. The guys they've been able to bring in, develop's been really impressive. And like I said, they're at that point now where they don't have to rely on the portal. They really use it to their advantage because there's not a ton of holes for them to have to replace anymore. So yeah, I'm really happy for Sark. He's a really good guy, really good coach, and yeah, I'm happy to see his success. I mean, even though he's gonna be a top competitor, obviously, but he's built a really impressive program. They're going to continue to kind of be on the rise, and I'm super excited to see their first year in the SEC. Having the Red River rivalry in the SEC now is going to be a lot of fun. I mean, definitely, my opinion, a top three rivalry in college football.
It's the hardest
That game,
rivalry to say. It honestly is Red River rivalry. I feel like it's a tongue twister. It's definitely rated number one for hardest one to say.
yeah, 100%. I mean, my top three rivalries. I mean, I got obviously Iron Bowl, Ohio State, Michigan. To me, this one's the third one. I mean, you can make a case it may be second, but I mean,
Stay
to me,
fair,
this is
baby.
always
Stay
one of
fair.
the more entertaining games on the schedule, and I don't expect that to be different going forward. I'm glad it's going to be an SEC game now. Adds even more intrigue and excitement for us, and for all SEC fans. So, having that game that's going to have SEC title, implications on it is going to be really exciting. And then with the schedule this year, I love, one of our favorite things is that A&M Texas rivalry get renewed. Even though Arkansas is not great, I'm glad that's a rivalry that's coming back now. Getting to see that game more often, old Southwest Conference foes. So it's going to be a lot of fun. That Georgia game in Austin, October 19th, we've talked about a lot. It's going to be one of the games of the year in college football, period. Going to have huge, conference title aspirations on that game. So, yeah, it's a really exciting and fun schedule, and it's gonna be a really exciting and fun year for Texas, first year in the SEC, and I'm really excited to see it.
What are you saying their records are going to be? I say 11-1. The only loss I'm seeing initially looking at it right now is Georgia. I say ceiling is 12-0. I think realistically 11-1. I think floor 9-3.
I think that as well. I mean, like I said, I think they're talented enough. Obviously, the pieces in place where they have the capability of winning every game they play in. As I've said previously through these previews, I'm not picking anybody to go undefeated though, even though there's some teams that have a 12-0 ceiling. Yeah, I agree with you. I like 11-1, maybe 10-2, because like you said, with the Oklahoma game there and Georgia back to back, that's a tough one. Even though they're both in the state of Texas, which is nice. And then I'm really interested in that last game at Kyle Field. Um, with that rivalry renewing, and you've already heard the chatter from A&M fans and from Texas fans, but A&M specifically, them getting that first game back at Kyle Field. I mean, that atmosphere, you kind of already heard the buzz around it. It's going to be a special one on rivalry weekend. So, I mean, that's not going to be an easy one to go in, and we know how rivalry games are too. Last year Florida State goes into a Florida team that's down the drain and barely pulls one out in the swamp. I mean, how many times Alabama barely pulls one out at all, but pulls a rabbit out of the hat. So, I mean, how many times have you seen clearly better teams go in and barely win or or even get beat. So, and this is a A&M team that, is still going to be a solid team that's got a solid roster. So at this point in the season, all their eggs are going to be in that basket, and there's a good chance that, they could knock Texas out of winning the SEC championship or going to the SEC championship. So
Yep.
a lot on that game. So yeah, I think 11-1, 10-2, with a floor, like you said, being 9-3. I think, to me, the losable games, obviously Oklahoma, Georgia at A&M. I think they win. I think they're going to win the rest of those games. But yeah, I like them. I'm torn between 11-1, 10-2. But I got them in that range for sure, and definitely, in the college football playoff, and I think a good chance to go to Atlanta.
Absolutely. I'm in the same boat with you.
I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Like I said, wrapping up week 7 of 8 of our SEC preview series. Just be sure to like and subscribe our channel. It'll really help us out. We appreciate that a lot if you guys would do that. Be sure to comment, on our videos on these previews, what your predictions or expectations are for these teams. We'll be back next week to wrap up, our final installment of this preview series with Oklahoma and Arkansas. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Another newcomer in the SEC in Oklahoma. So, and now fall camps are well underway, and football's just right around the corner now. We're 26 days away from week 1, so be here before we know it. And just appreciate everyone for tuning in. We'll catch y'all back next week.
Thank you, guys.